Hello and welcome to another special edition of Ask Sarah. This is our second live broadcast. The teacher-to-teacher community really overwhelmed us the last time we did this and sent in so many wonderful responses that we wanted to be sure and bring this to you again. But I will tell you, even though I'm the one doing all of the talking right now, you are really the ones making all of the difference. It is your comments, it's your questions, it's your feedback that makes this the conversation worth having. And that's really what this episode is about. This episode is about conversation. The conversations that we have with other teachers, the conversations that we have when you all interact in the comment section during the broadcast, even the conversations that we have with our teaching selves as we navigate this craft called teaching. Unlike our previous broadcast where I tackled a variety of topics, this time we're going to really focus in on one. This is going to be a focus on first year teachers and their mentors. So if you are a first year teacher, if you are a mentor, an administrator, if you teach down the hall from one, this is really for you. But I do feel like I have to just offer a little disclaimer here. I'm not really the kind of person who gets into labels, and so all of this talk about first year teachers, I don't want it to sound like we are singling anyone out, because this is not a conversation about initiation or fixing anybody. This is about the ecosystem of our profession and how we all are learning from each other. So here's what you can expect tonight. 3 segments. We're going to do a couple of new questions. Then I got some of my own mentors to respond to one of our readers. And finally, I dug into my very own first year teaching journal, and I'm going to pull that out for the first time ever. So I have said many times that questions are little acts of bravery. So don't hesitate to post those questions in that comment section, and I will be sure to periodically take those throughout the show. Well, let's get started with our 2 brand new questions. One that's coming from a first year teacher, and then the second one that's actually coming from a first year mentor. So the first year teacher writes, "Dear Sarah, how do you know what's important? There's so much to focus on. I can't seem to figure out where to start. Sincerely, first things first." Ugh, right? That is my first response is, oh, I know what this feels like. So have you ever been to like a really bad buffet? You know, the kind where there's rows and rows of all of this food, and you take a bunch of it and you realize it all kind of tastes the same in this manufactured kind of way. And then your taste buds feel like they're dying just a little bit because the chicken and the potatoes and the cake, they all taste exactly the same. Well, this is when we know that less isn't just more, but then it tastes better, right? So let's get practical. Because I am guessing that more than philosophy about getting too much on your plate, what you're really interested in are some practical solutions to making sense of all of these things that are coming your way. So this is what I would say. First and foremost, people come first. Your students come first, and you come first, right? I know that you've heard this over and over again, but you do have to take care of yourself. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that. After that, I think you can think about first things first in phases. So first of all, there are some basic things, right? You have to know where the computer is. You have to know where the printer is. You have to know how to, get your lunch and all of those really basic things, because those take up a lot of space. They can clutter up our brains, and they can take away from that teaching energy. So get that settled. And then put your energy into planning. And I think that's the second phase of this, is you really want to put your energy into thinking about those kids and thinking about instruction. But as you do that, don't tell yourself that you have to have magical lessons every day. I mean, that's for movies. It's not for real life. In fact, just today, I was teaching a lesson and I realized we were going off course, and we're going to have to regroup tomorrow. So there's not magic all of the time, and that's okay, because as we've talked about before, it's always the accumulation of small things that make the biggest difference. So appreciate those. The next thing I think you need to focus on is responding, which is actually different than grading. When you respond to your students' work, you are actually helping that cycle of really effective planning, because when you're responding to them, you are trying to learn from what they're giving you. And when you can learn from what they're giving you, you're going to be able to in turn give back, I think, in different ways. But remember that it always goes back to people, right? So making a parent phone call is important. Talking with your colleague is important. Going to one of your students' events is important. I remember an aha moment from my first year. I think it was probably February, dark and gray, and I kind of had this little aha moment where I realized that doing all of those people things wasn't taking away from my teaching at all. It was enhancing it, because when I spent too much time in my own little world, huddled over my desk and huddled over my computer, I kind of forgot to live. And the stuff of living is really the stuff of teaching. So I also want to make sure that you remember that teachers aren't the only ones having first years. In fact, we all, veteran teachers, have first years over and over again, just in different capacities. So the next letter comes to us from a first year mentor, and she writes, "Dear Sarah, here's the situation for you. I'm a mentor for the first time, and I've learned that there are some real management issues in my teacher's classroom. I'm worried if she doesn't regain control soon, the rest of the year will be awful, and it might make her think twice about being a teacher. The problem is, I don't know how to tell her without ruining our relationship. We're just getting to know each other, and I'm afraid if I'm too honest, she'll shut me out. What do I do? Sincerely, too soon or too late?" Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about the first 10 minutes of the first class of the first year that I taught. I'm in there, and after about 10 minutes, the assistant principal walks to the door, and he is holding in his hand a huge roll of masking tape. And immediately I started to put the pieces together, that what had happened, that as I was so consumed with what I was saying to the students, one of them took a roll of masking tape, opened one of the windows and flung it out the window, and it actually hit the assistant principal on the head. And of course, then he has to walk that up to me in my very first 10 minutes of teaching. So of course I am totally mortified. However, the lesson in the story is that it does get better, right? So it couldn't get much worse than that. I had, just could only get better. So like many new teachers, management was really tough for me, like the masking tape moment, right? But management was really tough for me, and I didn't need anyone to tell me that it was, because I already knew. So to you, first year mentor, I think that you need to remember that your mentee already knows that it's really difficult for her to manage the classroom, but telling you is different. Telling you is about as difficult as it is for a parent to confess that their child had that public temper tantrum and they didn't know what to do about it, right? So what she doesn't know right now is how to leverage the good stuff. She knows the bad stuff. She doesn't know how to leverage the good stuff. And that's really where you come in, right? You come in because you don't need to confront her. you need to confess to her, right? Help her see patterns. So this is one of the things that really helped me as I was trying to get control of a classroom. I started to really focus on patterns of behavior in students. So I would first ask myself, what is the most important behavior to change? And then when the bad behaviors happened, I would try to write down what happened right before it. Had I said something? Was it a time of the day? Was it a time of the week? Were certain students together? And then tried to use that pattern analysis to really help me try to figure out what to do. And I think that this is really crucial. I also want to share that in my first year of teaching, in one of my very first evaluations, my principal came in. And when he came into the classroom, he went to the back. And I didn't get started right away because I had a student who had been pretty quiet for most of the semester so far. She came up to me and she had this story she wanted to tell me, and she was so excited. And I thought it was wonderful. So we didn't start on time, and she sat down, and then we had the lesson. And at the end of the lesson, I was so excited because I thought my principal was going to say, "Oh, I can see that you're really building relationships with your students, and that's wonderful." And the first thing he said was, "You didn't start on time." And I think we have to remember when we're working with first-year teachers that they have to be able to see the good, and we have to be able to help them see those moments and how important those relationships really are.